Good morning, this is Lori with Time to Be Creative, and today I'm going to show you how to do a simple but very cute light bulb ornament. My friend Terry has asked me a few questions about how I go about making my ornaments out of light bulbs, so I thought I'd do a video. So you're going to need a few supplies. You're going to need a light bulb, some acrylic paint and sealer, a few brushes, a sock, some embellishments, and you want to make sure you have some ribbon or twine available. You're going to need your hot glue gun, and coffee is optional. It's very early here on the East Coast, and I needed to have my coffee. So, a couple of things as we get started. I'm just going to be using a regular light bulb today. If you have some that are blown and you're ready to throw them away, make sure you save those. Or you can purchase them at the dollar store. They're quite reasonable. You can find them sometimes 3 in a pack for $1. And for me, I'm getting ready for a craft show, so sometimes I purchase some. I don't have enough that have been donated to me. If it is a used light bulb, you want to make sure that it's clean before you start to work with it. So either use soap and water and clean it in your sink and then dry it real well, or you can wipe it down with alcohol. Now, one of two things you can do is you can base coat it with acrylic paint with your brush, which you can see here I've started this one. And I do it in 2 sections so that I can leave the bulb sit and dry. I don't want to have to sit and wait and hold it for the paint to dry. It does dry kind of quickly, but I would recommend that if you're going to do it this way and hand brush on your acrylic paint, that you do it and then let this first coat sit overnight. If you rush that process, sometimes your second coat will peel off. And I'm hoping you can see that your first coat really is not going to cover very well. I found an article on Pinterest where the crafter first put on a coat of acrylic sealer, and that gave the bulb a little more tooth. And I can see where that would work. What I'm going to work with today is a light bulb that my husband sprayed for me. Now, we've used here a primer and paint combination spray paint in white. I'm going to do a snowman, and I'm going to do a simple snowman that requires no eyes this morning. And his hat will pull down over top of his eyes, so you don't have to worry about doing any eye work on this project. So I'm going to use a color called Hot Shot Fiery Red, and that's by Americana. I love this paint. It's a neon color. And I'm going to use today Americana's Santa Red. I'm going to use that for the nose. I'm going to highlight with the Hot Shot. I'm going to use a baby blue. And that will be some shading and work that I'll do. And of course, black. Again, that's an Americana brand that I'm using this morning. And white, also Americana. All right, so the first thing I like to do is get my nose on. Make sure you have some water and paper toweling available. So I'm going to take this number 1 brush. This happens to be a Royal and Langnickel brush. I don't buy the cheapest brush, but I don't buy the most expensive either. I do a lot of crafting, and I am hard on my brushes, and I kind of pick out ones that are middle of the road, and once they're worn, I just toss them. You can get them on sale at the craft show, craft store. Sorry, got craft shows on the brain. Okay, so I'm going to just make an oval kind of a shape where I want my nose, and I kind of exaggerate a little bit. We're just doing a button nose on the snowman this morning. Oh, I didn't show you a finished snowman. I should have done that. Let me just get this on. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, it's a handcrafted piece. Let me quick show you. I don't have a button nose one here, but I'll show you this guy. He's got the carrot nose, but that's with the sock hat, and I decorated with the pom-poms. All right, so we're going to let that nose dry just a little bit. I forgot to put out my raspberry. I use a raspberry color for my cheeks. That's also an Americana paint. Just need a little bit of this. And I'm going to dry brush some cheek color on. And for that, I'm going to use this Lowe and Cornell quarter brush. I'm not really sure what it's called, a mop brush. So it's got soft bristles. This is a very small one. And I'm going to use the brush dry. I'm going to tap that into my paint. And then I'm scrubbing off most of the color. I don't want a whole lot of color on my cheek. You can put layers on. You can't, once you put it on, you can't take it off. So you want to go as light. Well, you might like it a little darker, but I like to start out light. Now there you can see I'm not getting any color, so I took off a little too much. So I'm going to reapply. And you can use a paper towel, you can use a paper bag to scrub off some of that color. So I'm just going to put this where I want my cheeks. Remember, we're not doing eyes this morning. So we'll just lightly scrub that back and forth. And you just work with it till you like it. You're going to get some little crumbs on there. Now I think I'm going to go back in and make my nose a little bigger. I should have brought my cheek color, I think, over a little bit more. So I'm going to make my nose a little bigger. I'm sure you'll do yours perfectly the first time. So if I make this nose a little bigger, maybe my cheek won't look so off-centered there. Now, a lot of times your red colors don't cover very well, and you probably noticing this is a little streaky. But I'm not too concerned about that, because when I come back in with my highlight colors, it's going to kind of grab onto that texture. Also keep in mind that if your nose doesn't turn out the way you like, you always can put some glitter on the nose. I'm probably fussing with this a little too much. So that's basically what you're going to do there. Now I've got to let that dry. So I have another one here off to the side that I did earlier. And he's all dried up and he's ready for me to come in and do my highlighting. So what I'm going to go and do first is use my Hot Shots Fiery Red, and I'm going to use an angle brush. You can use a square brush. I love the angle brush. So this is a 1/4 inch 6mm angle brush. Again, a Royal & Langnickel brush. And what I mean is I'm going to float some color to highlight the one side of my nose and then put a shadow on the other side. So you want to make sure your bristles have been nicely moistened for this technique. And then what you do is you dip your brush, tap off some of the moisture, you load some paint onto the corner of your brush, and then you work out some of that color on your palette, on your, if you're using tin foil or your paper plate, you have your paints on. And what that does is that paint travels across that brush, so you just have color on the one corner and then it kind of fades out to the other side. So I'm turning him upside down because I want my highlight on the right side of my nose. So I'm just going to come in and lightly press, spread those bristles, and put a little highlight on the side of his nose. And that generally only takes a few minutes to dry as well. My room is a little cold, so it's probably going to take mine a few minutes longer. I would suggest you make sure that that dries well before you start to do the second side, the left-hand side of the nose. I got a little hair on my brush there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the black. So I'm putting my brush in water, I'm tapping off the excess. If you get too much water on the brush, when you load the paint, it's going to run, and you're going to have a blob. Let me do this more in front of the camera. So I tapped off my water, and I've got my brush, I've got the paint on the tip, black, it's probably hard for you to see, and then I'm just pressing and pulling and moving that paint across the brush. Now I'm going to come in here to the right side of the nose, and you kind of do like a C stroke. And you would come as close to the edge as you can. And what I like to do is if I get a little further than I want, I just use the clean side of the brush. And clean up any paint I don't want. Now if that is a little too dark for you, I just come back in with a wet brush. Of course I've tapped off the excess water and kind of run my brush around. Now I've taken off a little too much there. Now if you haven't done this before, I would suggest you practice. Practice on a piece of tin foil, paper plate, before you do it on your project. And if you don't want that much of a contrast, you can use a darker red on the side, maybe like a barnyard red, to give you that contrast. You just want to create a shadow and then a highlight on the opposite side. So I think we'll call that finished. Now we're going to give him a little mouth. And I like to use a liner brush. And this is the 10/0 liner brush. This is Princeton brand. This isn't real long. The longer the brush, the more paint you can load into it. And what you want to do for your liner brush is take a little bit of paint from your little puddle and pull some out. Your brush is wet, and you want your paint to kind of be like almost like an inky, milky consistency. And you're going to drag your brush through that little puddle of paint. I like to drag and turn it as I'm dragging so that my brush comes to a nice point. Now you can just do a regular smile. I'm going to do a smile with a little bit of a wiggle. The more pressure, the thicker your line. Light pressure, using the tip of your brush, you're going to have a thin line. Now here I started to run out of paint, and that's my brush hair split a little bit, so I'm going to come back in. I'm using my pinky finger to stabilize my hand. And then at the other side of the mouth, I'm just going to put like a little comma stroke here. And at the bottom, I'm just going to draw a little, like half moon shape. And then I'm going to fill that in with black. Now I have my glue gun already plugged in. So there he is. And that's the basics of it. Now I like to go in and add some additional things to my piece. I'm going to float some color around the nose, the bottom of the nose. I'm going to use the baby blue for that. Now when I'm doing a piece that I want it to look a little more vintage or rustic, I'll use like a milk chocolate or a honey brown color. But for my snowman, I like to use the baby blue to kind of give the feel of it being cold. So again, I've dipped my brush, I've tapped off most of the paint, I've loaded the corner, and I'm just going to pull my color through. And I'm just going to come here at the bottom of the nose. I've picked up something on my work mat. I'm working on top of one of Ranger Ink's work surface mats. I'm not quite sure what they call it. They're about $17 to $19 in the craft store. Oh my goodness. It's one of the best things I've ever bought. Nothing sticks to it. Nothing goes through it. You can use it as a palette. So I'm using the same process as we did the highlight and the shadow on the nose. And I'm just putting a little bit of blue under the nose, and you can make that as dark or as light as you like. Again, I'm dipping my brush, tapping off the excess. I'm loading a little bit of my color on the corner. I'm working that through my brush, just push down and pull, and I'm going to put a little bit under my mouth. Like that. Now I'm going to add a little white. Again, I'm going to come back with my liner brush. I'm going to do a little comma stroke on the top of the nose, and then I'm going to put a little bit of white at the bottom of the mouth. You don't need to fuss with all this. I'm just a little crazy when it comes to this. Now, at this point, you need to let this paint dry, and then you need to seal it. Either use a spray acrylic sealer, or you can use a brush on. We had a very rainy day yesterday, and I couldn't seal my bulb. So I put some brush sealer on it. So I have one ready to decorate. So I'm going to move my paper towel aside. And so here's this guy. He's already been sealed. I have my sock. I'm going to use a jingle bell. Just doing a simple decoration. Now you can embellish these as much or as little as you like. And I'm going to take a piece of twine. Have that handy, because I'm going to tie this off. And let's see here. I'm going to bring in my glue gun. Now, I make a lot of snowmen that I put eyes on, and these eyes really are not too hard. They're just like a teardrop, where I put a highlight, put a few lashes on. You could do a button nose or the carrot nose, but now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put a hat on this snowman and cover him up like he has no eyes. So you just take your sock. I'm taking, this is a full-length sock. You can use those, especially if you're going to do a no-eyes snowman. You can use the, like the little ankle socks. Just pick. Alright, I've got my painted light bulb that's been sealed. I've got my sock ready. I've got my jingle bell. My glue gun's been plugged in. So I'm just going to take this sock and pull it down on the light bulb where I want it. And then I'm just going to pull it forward and kind of give myself an idea of where I want to trim him. So I'm going to cut the sock maybe about there. And then I'll use that second half for another snowman, probably. I got a new glue gun and it won't stand up. It's driving me crazy. Okay. So then I just come in with the glue gun while I have this where I want it on his head, and I just sneak a little bit of glue under there and let it fall back down. And I sneak up another little area, pop in a little glue, and I do that all the way around. In a little glue. And then you just fiddle with it until you like the way it looks. So I'm going to take my twine, my little piece of twine. You could use ribbon, whatever look you're going for. And I'm just going to tie that. And pull it really tight and give it a good knot. And then I'm going to put my jingle bell on. I like to crisscross it so I know it's not going to go anywhere. So I put one side in one way, and then I put it in the other way, and then I pull it, and then I tie it again. Now if you're going to do pom-poms or a button, you may want to glue your hat down first. So I'm just going to sneak under here, put a little blob of glue, and then just sit that down where I want it. And then just hold it for a few seconds so your glue dries. Now you could trim this sock. I think I will trim it a little bit, and I usually like to leave my pieces of twine or ribbon, whatever I've used, a little longer. That's just me, but you could trim those off underneath where you can't really see those. I'm just going to go ahead and trim a little bit more of that sock off. And just make it the way you like it. Now, about now, you're probably thinking, how is she going to attach that so it can hang on a tree? Well, I've tried a couple of different things, but most recently, what I've come to conclude works best for me is I take a big darning needle, I'll take another piece of my ribbon or my twine. I was using wire there for a while too. You can use a piece of wire. My husband has suggested like maybe some fishing, what do they call that? You know, the fishing cord or whatever they put on fishing poles. But that stuff's so hard. It's plastic and it's so hard to get a good secure knot. And then I'm afraid if that would come undone, then the light bulb hits the ground, you've got a mess. So I just put a piece of twine in my darning needle, and I'm just going to come through the top of this sock. I'm going to grab a pretty good chunk of it, and I'm just going to pull this through. And then I just tie it. Now I tie it where I just do a regular tie, and then I just kind of wind my ends around a couple of times. But you could do a square knot, really anything. You just want it to be secure. And then to even make it more secure, I take a little bit of Mod Podge. I have it in this little needle nose applicator bottle, and I just put a little bit of that. It dries clear, but I just put a little bit of that on the knot. Now with the wire, I always try to hide that down into the sock and weave it through, and I've pulled holes in the sock, and that wears me out. So I've just started to use either ribbon or the twine. And there you have it. He's ready for the tree. So, if you work on this project, I'd love to see your finished work. You can leave me a message. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Happy crafting.